Hi, and welcome to the Literary Sipper. I'm Amber Vitti Hill, your host, and today we're going to be talking about planning your days. We talk a lot about planning your reading, but planning your day as a creative can be really a struggle, especially if you work a day job and you get home and you're tired and you've got to do all the house sort of things. And if you're a parent, then you've got to do the parenting shuffle and taxi service that happens in the evening. And so sometimes it's hard to plan your day in terms of creativity and when you're going to spend time doing the things that fill you up. And we spend a lot of time on this channel talking about why creativity should be reframed as self-care. And in the same way you make time for workouts, or you make time to get your hair cut, or you make time to have lunch with a friend, it's important to also plan time for your creativity. And the number one response or resistance comes from this concept of inspiration and the idea that, well, when I sit at my desk, I'm kind of paralyzed by the blank page, or if I get into my studio, I don't know where to begin. And especially if your creative life is not rhythmical, if it is a series of stops and starts, and so you always feel like you're beginning from ground one. One of the most important things to remember is that planning time to do it doesn't mean if the inspiration strikes you, you don't act upon it. It just means you're recognizing in yourself this need to pay attention to that creative voice, to the part of you that says, I want to try to be in my body and in my heart at the same time. Planning is $1 million business. Planners, Notion, productivity books, YouTube videos. How do you do this literally? Depends on you. And that's the number one thing that I would underscore, is that there's no right way or wrong way to do this. For those of you who like to write things down, having a planner and blocking out time for your creativity is going to be important. For those of you who are visual, you might want a Notion planner or your Gmail calendar, and you block out time for your creative enterprises. And even if it's a small amount of time, even if it's just the 10 minutes before the bus comes that you have to write a quick poem or write a journal entry, or even to leave yourself breadcrumbs for a later date, all of those things count. But the more you can do them daily and have a daily discipline, the better off you will be, because you will have your creativity at the forefront of your brain, and you will also have those ideas percolating even when you're not fully paying attention to them. So even in the midst of other activities or other work, your brain can be thinking and resonating on the ideas that will come to fruition when you finally sit down and make time to do the actual work of being creative. But how do you plan a day where creativity is at the center? And if not at the center, then at least part of the day. And one of the things to know is know your time of day. In Carol Lloyd's book, Create a Life Worth Living, she talks about being the I in the AM. Most of us start off our day very optimistic about ourselves. I'm going to do this. I'm going to accomplish that. I'm going to work on my book. I'm going to set up my paints as soon as I get home from work. And then sometime in the afternoon, you turn into the you. You have to do, you need to do, you shouldn't do. And that switch can change how we plan our day. And sometimes then, even at night, it turns into the we. We really are tired. We really deserve that treat. We really just want to rot on the couch and watch Netflix. And then our creative life just lives in dreams. It doesn't live in reality, because the I turns into the you, which turns into the we. So that creativity, that the desire, the productivity in the morning, by the time we get to the evening, sometimes doesn't last. Sometimes it awakens. Some of us are night owls, and we finally get to do what we want at night. And then in the morning, we're paying for it. And so suddenly the pairing of the nighttime creative work doesn't feel very good in the morning. And so then we don't have good associations with it. But knowing your time of day can help you tap into when those creative pockets of time are really the most viable. Are you someone that needs to make time for it in the morning? Are you someone that the afternoon, like post lunch, you can really just dive into something juicy? Or is it a calming thing? Is it a calming down time? And a lot of it depends on what your creative enterprise is. If you're someone who needs to make noise, for example, if you're a drummer or you are a singer, and nighttime might not be the right time if you share your house with other people, or if you are in an apartment complex, or maybe it's the signal that you need to seek out a rehearsal space and honor your creative life in a way that you haven't before, where you're spending money on a studio space because you're saying, this is really important to me, and I'm going to make time to go there, and I'm going to make the space available to me anytime I need it. The second thing when it comes to planning your day that I would say is just to take a baby step. You'll feel better. We've talked about this before where, 10 minutes matters, 5 minutes matters. All of these things matter. So look at your schedule, and even if it's back to back to back to back meetings, is there a way to pair your lunch with something small creatively? So instead of scrolling your phone while you're eating, or even worse, sitting at your desk doing work while you're eating, that you actually just bring your notebook with you or sketchbook with you and use your lunchtime in that way to tap into nourishing your soul as well as your stomach. And I would also encourage you to think about your habits. What are the things you do daily without fail? If you create a daily creative practice, then that discipline word becomes really interesting. I've said this a couple of times to different people this week, where discipline becomes both a noun and a verb. So you have the discipline of your creative project, but you also have the discipline of doing it every day. And some days you're going to deep dive and some days you're not. And you can plan accordingly. But if you think about things that you do daily without fail, like teeth brushing or exercise or walking the dog, why is creativity or the work something else? Shouldn't it be part of the same day? Is it something that you really love? And maybe if you don't really love the thing that you're doing, it's time to do a new thing. Or maybe you love doing the thing. You love making the ceramic piece or painting the watercolor, but you don't like the business of sharing it. So you don't want to put it on Etsy, or you don't want to seek out a student a client so that you can support your creative life. Those are different scenarios, and those require different kinds of planning. You might put in the business of your art in your weekly schedule, but your daily schedule should be about connecting to your soul, connecting to your heart's work and heart's desire. Can you pair your creativity with a habit you're already doing? And so if you walk the dog every day at 1:00, can you do your creative work right afterwards or right before it? If you have to be in the bus line for your kids at 4, is there a way that from 3:30 to 4, that becomes your creative time, and then 4:00, you can just sit in the bus line and either think or read or write while you're waiting, and continue it, but in a less intense way, in a less fraught way, just as a time filler. I mean, we scroll constantly and we don't even realize how much screen time we're using. And is there a way to turn your phone time into creative time? Instead of going on social media, using your voice memo to play with music or play with words, or to talk to yourself in terms of what ideas are percolating in your mind. So when you do get into your studio and you do get the chance to paint or create or sculpt, you know where you're already going. You have talked about it to yourself all week in the pickup line. And I think this is really an important practice, and we don't use our phones as the tools to help us be more creative. And the third thing I would say is really about time. We overestimate and underestimate how much time we actually need to make something. And lots of large projects can be broken down into smaller pieces. So, if you're sitting there saying, like, I don't have time to be creative, you underestimate the idea of an hour of creativity is kind of a luxury in a lot of ways. And you can get a lot of work done in an hour, for sure. But you can get a lot of work done in 15 minutes too. When we do free writing in a children's lit class that I'm taking, I'm able in the 15 minutes she gives us to have a framework of a story idea at the very least, and if not, have 2 or 3 pages kind of fully developed. Maybe they don't end up anywhere. Maybe they end up in a draft, but they're there where they weren't there before. And that's just a free write situation. So, and I know there are certain disciplines that are quite different, but if you just give yourself the smallest amount of time frequently, you will be able to see when you do get those large chunks of time, where you can take them, how you can develop them, how you can get to the business of sharing them if that's your goal. And that's another thing to consider is like, what is your intention with your creative life? Is your intention to be seen, to share, to be published? Or is your intention just to find something that calms your body, that keeps you engaged with your heart, that keeps the art a part of your life because you feel connected to something larger, nature, the seasons, whatever it is? Those are 2 different pursuits, and they should be different in some ways. And in some ways you should have simultaneous ones where you have one thing that you're really trying to hustle for and create a project, and you have one thing that you do just for yourself, that you do just because it feels good to be creative. And I think that when you make time for both, you'll find that you feel more fulfilled. And for some of us, our work itself is creative, so we get that kind of the business of being creative as part of our work. I know I felt this way as a teacher. I got to talk about books and talk about writing and help students get to who they needed to be and help them harness their voice. And I was fulfilled creatively in a lot of ways through that experience. And so that's when I found myself doing a little more painting or poetry writing for my creative stuff that was just for me, that had no intention of being shared with the world. And for some people, the opposite is true, where their desire to pursue publication or an audition or a gallery show is all encompassing. And to those people, I would say maybe it's time to put yourself in a beginner space so there's less pressure. So if you're really feeling the pressure to move forward with a project to the public stage, maybe starting something like a new instrument can challenge you in a way and can only be practiced a little bit a day, but it still gives you that edge where you're not fully consumed by a project that may or may not come to fruition. There are a lot of parts of sharing work that are beyond your control. There is also the idea of space. Are you portable, or do you need space for your work? And you have to plan accordingly, right? A writer can write pretty much anywhere. And in that case, planning artist dates where you take yourself out of your typical space can be really invigorating. But for some people who have to practice instruments in a rehearsal space or need studio space to make large-scale paintings, the access to the space is also part of what you need. And if you are at the mercy of those things, can you make your creative habit portable in some small way so you don't miss a day because the perfect space does not present itself? So, for example, if you're an artist and you have to share your studio space with another artist and it's not your time, but you're feeling inspired, is there a way to make your art portable, to have sketchbooks or plein air easel that you can set up, or something else, so that you maintain the schedule of, I'm going to work on my art from 1 o'clock to 2:30 every day, or Monday through Friday, or whatever your schedule ends up being. And on the days that I don't have access to that studio space for whatever reason, I'm still going to hold to that schedule. And I'm just going to make my work portable. Like, for example, if you're a musician and you have a rehearsal space in New York City, maybe you get a MIDI controller or computer set up so you can do things at home. And I think many people who pursue their art to a certain point already do those things. But if you're at the beginning of your journey and trying to take your creativity seriously, having the right tools and the right space is integral. And then being able to make your art portable is part of the planning. And planning to go somewhere is important as well. Planning those artist dates, those retreats, those connections with the community, those are also very important to growing as an artist and planning your day as an artist. The fifth thing I want to mention is that you should be doing some macro planning, not just micro planning of your day and your hours, but some macro planning and taking some time to really looking at a week, a month, a season, a year. And don't be afraid to voice outlandish things. Don't be afraid to say, I want an art gallery show by the end of the year, or I want to put on a play with a local repertory theater by the end of the year. Revisit those goals monthly and see, have I moved anywhere near towards that goal, or has something else taken up space in that pursuit? And it's not to say that it's like a New Year's resolution. It's more like, let's just make manifest by saying things out loud, large things. I want to finish this draft of this novel. I want to have 3 large scale paintings ready to show to a gallery. I want to work on my website so that people can find me to teach vocal lessons. Whatever it is, like, have your big goal and then work backwards from there. And you can get down into your daily planning. And then that way you're not sitting in front of the blank page or sitting in the empty room and thinking to yourself, what should I be doing here? I'm really stuck. You have your big dream. You've spent some time thinking about it. You've broken it down into seasons, knowing that if you're in the springtime, you're going to feel a little more like new projects, new energy, cleaning out the old projects. And if you're in the wintertime, you're going to feel like diving deep into something, one thing, and sometimes the energy level isn't the same, but the dream, the big goal, the macro goal is there. And I would urge you to take some time and really think about the goals for the year. And then how can they fit into your day? And even if your day gets away from you, how can they be small 10-minute blocks that you can do for yourself and still feel like you're inching towards your goal? And I would also say, lastly, don't get bogged down by the plan. Be prepared to shift and change. You are an artist. You are the master of shifting and changing. You are the master of reinvention. You are powerful, but there is no replacement for the work. And so keep track of what goes well. Keep track of the times and spaces and intentions that make you feel creative and powerful, and try to recreate them as often as possible. How can you plan for your good days? What was your week's happy moment? What was the point of it that made you feel, my creative life matters? It makes me feel good. And that's the bottom line. If your art makes you feel good, even if there's frustrating moments, even if there's negative feedback, even if you have self-doubt, it should make you feel good. And that's this week's episode, and I'll talk to you soon. Thanks for listening to The Literary Sipper. I hope you enjoyed this episode and learned something new. If you did, please subscribe and leave a rating and review if you're feeling especially generous. Until next time, keep reading, keep writing, and keep putting your voice in the world. It's waiting for you.